First of all, thank you very much for your time. It's really a pleasure and a great honor for that you give me the chance to interview you. This is Maria. I'm with Larry Kane. Hi, Larry. How are you doing?
Hi, Maria. I'm doing well. I'm in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, getting ready to leave for London and the world premiere on Thursday.
Yeah, that will be a brilliant experience and fantastic. Larry, how it happened that a young broadcast journalist from Miami like you was then were offered to travel every stop on the Beatles 64, 65, and some of 66 American tour?
Well, basically, the station counted on me as a news director to take care of all of the acquisition of news, and I wrote Brian Epstein, their manager, a letter. Basically asking him for one single interview in Jacksonville at the Gator Bowl. And what I got back was this big letter inviting me to travel on the entire tour, 25 cities, 35 days, 32 concerts, with a sum of $3,000 to pay my way. And I took it to my bosses and I said, I'm not going.
You're not going.
The assassination of a president, racial divisiveness in the United States, Cubans by the thousands coming into Miami, changing the entire face of the area. A lot of major news events, the escalation of the war in Vietnam, and why would I want to travel? And this is exactly the way I felt with a band that was going to be here in November and October and gone by December, and that's the way I felt. So I felt it a waste of time. The only person who tried to talk me into it was my mother, who died that summer, and who told me the travel with these guys is going to be the biggest thing that ever happened in your career. And I thought she was out of her mind.
And the 9th of February, 64, the Beatles debuted in the USA at the Ed Sullivan Show for 74 million people. But only a few months before, the situation was pretty different. They were unknown in the United States, and the single released in the UK had not very much success. So, Larry, how did happen such a fast change in the audience mind? They had a lot to prove, I guess. Also, even to you, right?
Well, absolutely. One of the reasons the fast change happened is the president was shot on November 22nd, 1963. 1 month later, on December 26th, I Want to Hold Your Hand was released to the United States. Now, let me give you some history that a lot of people are not aware or may not be. The Beatles had many, many hits in England in 1963.
Yeah.
At the time they were finally released in the United States, December 1963, early 1964, all those hits had piled up. So every single week there was a new song coming out, and people could not believe the proliferation of this music. So that was one thing, the amount of music that they released in a short period of time. The second thing was what I call the Passion era, where this you had to be there to understand it, that every one of those girls who went to see them in concert, every one of those girls who never met them, believed that one of them on the radio or on 45 records or in person was singing directly to them. That when Paul was singing All My Loving, that he was singing to, she was just 17, you know what I mean? I saw her standing there. These songs were all songs that these kids could relate to. And I saw briefly one example of it. When they came in 64 for their short visit, they came to Miami to relax a little bit and to do one of the Ed Sullivan shows. And I couldn't believe it. The jalousie windows of Terminal B at Miami International Airport were smashed out by 5,000 kids. And I said, no, it's just a fad. And this turned out to be the story I don't want to cover. Turned out to be one of the biggest stories in my career.
Yeah. Larry, you've traveled 50,000 kilometers along with the Beatles, 52 concerts, with no rest from one show to the next one. This is too many hours of transport, and you were on the front row. How it was to be with John, Paul, George, and Ringo while traveling?
Well, traveling was tough because I worked 18 hours a day. They could relax late at night. I would have to start preparing my reports for the next morning. I had a 41-pound tape recorder, Maria. 41 pounds. reel to reel. It was very hard to do it technically, but it was made up. It was compensated by the fact that I was just in a frenzy of reporting and traveling and motion and hardly eating and very little sleep, maybe 3-4 hours a day, that I couldn't get out of it. And when I came home, I said, I can never live again normally. It'll just never happen. But it was compensated by the fact that I was traveling with 4 very extraordinary young men. I mean, in their own way, for me, I was, their age was 21, same as Paul. George was 20, John and Ringo 23. And, of course, we were polar opposites. John one time called me a nerd from the 1950s. He says, what planet do you come from? And but nevertheless, we got along because I asked them serious questions. They were wonderful to be with. There was very little anger or hostility for all the pressure they had, and the fact that they were cooped up in hotel rooms and airplanes and cars, and had very little opportunity to be there, to be with people. They had a wonderful disposition. With the exception of John, they all had very normal childhoods. Ringo, of course, was an only child, and they were just great to be with. I mean, I really liked them a lot, and I didn't expect to like them a lot. They wore high-heel boots and Beatle boots, and I was dressed very conservatively, and it was just a different world. And I love what they did on the plane. Yeah. Every night they would go up to the front of the plane where the opening acts sat. And the opening acts were some pretty big groups, including the Righteous Brothers, who had some of the greatest songs in the history of music. Yes. And they wanted to make sure they were okay, that they weren't upset by the fact that they were being booed off the stage. And there were so many kindnesses. In Dallas, Texas, 3 girls walked through a plate glass window trying to get to them. And there were some very serious injuries, and they sent flowers. And one of them went up, and friends and touring members went up to make sure. And for months, they checked on the girls' conditions. I mean, they were really, truthfully, caring people who were sensitive and cared about other human beings.
Yeah, wow, that's fantastic.
That made it fun to be with people like that.
Yeah, I can't imagine. I can't even imagine that. This documentary is titled 8 Days a Week. Indeed, you were present when they started working on this composition at a flight from Dallas to New York. What do you remember of that moment? Did they used to compose or even rehearse in the plane?
No, they did have a tape recorder, a small portable tape recorder, and they listened. They were listening to 8 days a week, so they asked me to listen to it. So first and only time they've asked me for input on music. And I felt that the song started too slowly. And, so I suggested they pick up the pace. And I think they accepted. So really the song should be called Lennon, McCartney, and Kane.
So you collaborated also with George Martin. A little bit of his role.
I collaborated for about 5 seconds, but no, it's the only song I ever saw them actually listen to and talk about.
Yeah, but one thing I know you collaborated with is in the first U.S. tour in '64, they gave a concert at the Gator Bowl in Jacksonville. This show was going to be segregated, but the guys said they could not perform in such conditions. What happened here? Was this really the first show ever blacks and whites sat together at the Gator Bowl?
It was not only the first show; it was the first event. Hundreds of football games were played there. And it was a symbol of the American football South. Yeah. And I told them in Las Vegas that the event was going to be segregated. They stood up, starting with Paul, the man, and they just opposed it for 19 days of negotiations, and finally the place was desegregated. And Ron Howard, who directed this movie. I haven't said enough about the work he did to make this happen. Ron Howard was so immersed in making this movie with the White Horse Pictures production crew and Imagine Entertainment, and Nigel Sinclair, who's one of the producers. They did something that was amazing. They found a woman who was there, and she was black and maybe 14, 13, 14, 15, somewhere around there. And she talks in the movie today about what an experience it was for the first time in her life, sitting with white people.
Did the Beatles change as their fame grew up? There were fundamental changes from the 64 to 65, or from 65 to 66?
Well, 65, they were more confident. There's no question about it, because in 64, they didn't really know if they could make it in the United States. They were more confident. They weren't cocky or anything like that, but they were confident. In 66, for the few times I saw them, they looked like they'd pretty well had it. Remember, they'd been doing concerts, and this is one thing that Ron Howard pointed out, that the writers in this film pointed out. They've been doing concerts since they were at the Cavern Club, and this was 1959, 1958, 1960, and this film covers a little bit of that, but it really shows you that in terms of international touring and big-time touring, it was only 4.5 years from the time they had Ringo join the band, 63, 64, 65, 66. That was it, and they stopped touring, and the world never saw them again until a famous moment that appears at the end of this movie.
Yeah. It's always said that the Beatles shows the audience could hardly hear them. Not the sound tools at that period, and fans screaming. Did this affect them in a frustrating way? What was their feedback normally after one show? They were happy or not content with it?
They didn't know.
They didn't know.
Because they were just singing and they were doing their thing. Giles Martin was able to extract the sound for many of the scenes in this movie. And by the way, they talk about unseen footage. This movie takes you right there. You're on the stage with them. You're up close. And when I first saw the movie, first my wife and I were asked to come to New York for a screening. I could not believe how the chills I got, because I felt like I was back there. If I felt like I was back there, and I was there, you can imagine what people who see this film are going to believe. Because the reality of this film is, when you watch it and you see the whole story, you want to rewind it and see it again. It's that good.
You want to see it again and again and again, and all the life. You never get tired of the Beatles, right?
I'm Larry Kane. I travel with the Beatles. I'm proudly in the new Ron Howard film. My best to everyone in Spain and the Breakfast Club, and I hope you enjoy the movie.